Hi and welcome to another gaming video, and in today's video I want to talk about how fantastic and how revolutionary the Nintendo DS was when it was released. The first model was brought out in 2004, which we sort of refer to now as the FAT, and it really was a bit of a game changer, to coin a phrase. We're talking about a system that done more than just played games in an era before smartphones had really taken off. So the original model was released in 2004. We didn't see the likes of like the iPhone until 2007. Smartphones or feature phones before that tried the whole gaming thing and portability and media, and it was sort of in its infancy and not fantastic. So the Nintendo DS came out in 2004 and it was a huge step over the Game Boy Advance. Similar style, clamshell folding thing, rechargeable battery, but it was a massive improvement. So let's look at what you got on a Nintendo DS. And when I say DS, I'm talking about, for the purpose of this video, the original DS. The DS Lite came out in 2006, virtually identical, just a few minor changes. So it came with built-in Wi-Fi. It meant you could play multiplayer games locally without the need of a link cable. So if you had two DS's, you could play together in the same Wi-Fi zone. And some of the games, most of the games, required each person to have a cartridge, but I'm sure there was a few games that you could share your game, or you could play smaller sections of the game if you didn't have two cartridges. As well as that, it introduced online gaming, something that the previous Nintendo handhelds hadn't had. I remember playing Mario Kart Online. It was a very fiddly process. The whole Nintendo connection thing and the fact that their wireless only uses WEP, even in 2004, was a bit tricky. Certain routers would only work with it, and if you didn't have one, you'd have to use a USB connection stick to try and sort of faffle around and get it to work. So it wasn't the greatest, but it was a massive step over something like the Game Boy Advance SP, which didn't have any online. Talking of the Game Boy Advance, the DS Lite and the original DS both had a Game Boy Advance slot in them, so you didn't lose any of your game library. It was fully backwards compatible, bar a few things which just wouldn't fit. So there was a couple of games that had accessories that just wouldn't fit in this slot or fit around it. But other than that, it was great for Game Boy Advance games. And even today, a DS Lite is probably your best option for playing your Game Boy Advance games because of the increased battery and the fantastic screens on them. It is an absolutely superb option. Talking about the battery, Nintendo state that they will last up to about 10 hours, which I can attest to. Even now, both my DS's, which I think have got their original batteries, that still last an absolutely amazing amount of time. It's got an 850 mAh battery, which doesn't seem a lot compared to sort of smartphones today, but it works. The low hardware and the low power means that that little battery in there can make a DS last for a very, very long time. Onto the audio, it was the first Nintendo console to feature stereo speakers. So you can see, this is my DS Lite. You've got a speaker on each side. Previously there was just one, and even the original DS had stereo speakers, so that was a fantastic little addition. Another little feature that maybe seemed a little gimmicky, but it really just added to the whole DS experience, was the fact that it had a microphone, which is here on the DS Lite, used for speech recognition, and some games would allow you to blow into the microphone to interact with the game. It was just another little addition to the DS range that just gave it even more of an edge. So I've skirted around so far the fact that it's a DS. It's DS, which stands for dual screen, and one of those screens is a touch screen. And it was really one of the unique selling points of the DS, is that you had a touchscreen on the bottom. And the whole software library and Nintendo really got behind it. It is a fantastic addition. It opened up that it was more than just a games console, because you had things like brain training where you could draw on the screen, write on the screen. There was a lot of art programs, even games such as Drawn to Life where you would use the touchscreen to draw. And even for regular games, the bottom's touchscreen could be used for switching weapons, and even in games like Super Mario, you use the bottom screen to select additional power-ups and things like that. So it really gave it a massive edge over its competition and brought even more fun to the DS range. As I touched on in a previous video, the fact that it's got dual screens and one of those is a touch screen kind of hinders it in going forward, because it's very difficult to emulate or bring those games over to a newer system because of the way that they utilise both screens and one of them being a touch. But in terms of actual hardware and playing it on a DS, it brought so much more to the platform. One additional thing that you had on the original DS, it's on the DS Lite and it's on DSi, but they got rid of when they introduced the 3DS, was PictoChat. And it was like a little mini chat room that you could talk between multiple DSs. I think you could have up to 4 possibly, or there was 4 rooms that you could go into, and you could send messages and draw little pictures and send them off to those in your little chat room. It really was just a great bit of fun. Yet again, something else that is another selling point, or just another little notch on how good the DS and DS Lite and DSi on this occasion was. This is my DS Lite. I recently picked up this red one. My trusty silver one is looking a bit bad, but even though this is very old, it's still talking 2006, so it's a 14-year-old little console, it still works. This one isn't in the best of conditions, hinges a little bit wobbly, but it still works, and everything else works fantastic on it. So for durability, these are great. This is my other DS Lite, which is in perfect condition and the hinges are still fantastic and it looks great. So durability, they were superb. Now the DS Lite was far more durable than the original DS, the Fat. If you to go on somewhere like eBay, you will find a lot of broken original DSs. The hinges weren't up to what they were supposed to be. They looked like they were Game Boy Advance SP hinges put onto a bigger system, and that is one downside of the original DS. Its hinges really did give up, which they seem to have fixed pretty much with the DS Lite. There are still a lot of DS Lites with hinge problems, but not as bad as the original DS. That is it. That is me talking about the original DS and DS Lite and how fantastic these devices were. Back then, they were fantastic. Today, they're not so much. They're sort of more niche, more collectors, more retro. Still absolutely fantastic little systems to play on. I absolutely love the DS. I loved it when it came out. I still love it now. I've got 2 DS Lites, a 3DS and a new 2DS XL. I am a massive fan of the whole DS range. One small topic that we haven't touched on is the actual processing power and hardware inside the DS. The original DS and the DS Lite both featured a 67 MHz processor and 4 meg of video RAM. They were never designed to be powerhouse gaming machines. That's not how Nintendo work. They always seem to release consoles that are, I'm not going to say they won't compete with what else is out there. They're never trying to push the boundaries of technology. They're always kind of a little step behind, and they use that to increase battery power, and they win in other ways. So you've like the whole touch screen and the blow-in, and the fact that it could play Game Boy Advance games. This gives them their edge. They've got their whole Nintendo franchises, which they don't share with anyone else, and they play those games perfectly. And that's how Nintendo sells so well. They don't have to push awesome hardware to sell a games console. They have other ways of doing it. They offer slightly more unique consoles with different features that you don't see on the likes of Sony and Microsoft. Even when they brought out the DSi in 2009, it was a step up. I mean, it had some cameras and better Wi-Fi, but it wasn't fantastic, and it wasn't aimed to compete with whatever was going on at the time. You had things like the PlayStation Vita, which was an absolute powerhouse of a portable console, but sales will show you that the DS range far outsells the Vita, despite the fact that all of the DS range is lower powered than its competition. So that's me talking about how fantastic the DS was back when it was released in 2004, the Lite in 2006 and the DSi in 2009, and I still play on mine, I still love mine, and it's a superb console, so check it out. That's the Nintendo DS. I think for its time it was very revolutionary. Link, like, subscribe, enjoy.